Yesterday, 3 federal judges heard arguments both for and against the lifting of the current stop, the block on Donald Trump's Muslim travel ban. Now, these are judges from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and understand that they're not currently deciding the merits of the actual lawsuit. But they are considering whether Washington and Minnesota are likely to succeed on the merits of their lawsuit, and theoretically, they could take away the block, which has existed since Friday of last week. So this is not the final step, the final hearing for this law, but it is an important one. And so yesterday they had the hearing. There was a audio-only live stream of this that many thousands of Americans from across the country tuned into. We're going to highlight a couple of the interesting points because, somewhat surprisingly, the judges seemed critical of the government's argument on a couple of different points, and we want to focus on a few of those. Judge Canby, who's one of the 3 judges hearing these arguments, pointed out that during last week's hearing in Seattle, the federal government's lawyer was unable to provide any examples of federal crimes committed in the U.S. by visa holders from the 7 countries. Now, if you've been following this, you know that the travel ban also applied to those with green cards and valid visas. They were very clear about that early on and pushed for those people to be restricted in their travel rights. Now they're trying to back off and say, well, we never intended to stop those people from traveling because they realize how ridiculous it is. But those people were still stopped, and so I'm glad that Judge Canby points out that those class of people, people with those legal standings, have not been found to have committed any acts of terrorism. That one of the Department of Justice representatives responded to this claim by Judge Canby by saying, yes, Your Honor, these proceedings have been moving quite fast, and we're doing the best we can, which you'd think you would have done before passing the travel ban, rather than desperately trying to find justifications for it afterward. Now, he cited an example of people from Somalia who were convicted in the United States of supporting Somali-based terror group al-Shabaab. Now, you might think if they claim that in court, well, then it must have actually happened. There must have been this case. The judge responded by saying, is that in the record? Can you point us where in the record you were referring? And the Department of Justice representative had to concede, no, it is not in the record. There's so many fake terrorist attacks that have happened lately.
I need to comment on that very quickly. So, if anything, regardless of which side you fall on, and maybe you agree with this travel ban, you have to at least acknowledge the fact that there is a lack of preparedness when it comes to the issues that Donald Trump and his administration continue to push. Signing executive orders without thinking things through and without having specific examples ready while you're being challenged in court is insane. And so that should raise red flags for individuals on both sides of the aisle, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, doesn't matter if you're the most progressive person or the most right-wing person. It's worrying that we have people in charge right now that don't seem to be prepared for the job that they're required to do.
And that back and forth that we just talked about is incredibly important because there we're talking about the argument for why this travel ban needs to exist, why it needed to be passed in the first place, and why it is so critical that the block on it, which currently exists, needs to be lifted. Donald Trump has been tweeting every day saying that the judges are stopping us from having the safety and security that we need, and that if an act of terrorism happens, it's going to be on the judge who blocked it. And yet they can't come up with an example of anyone in modern history of the sort that they're blocking actually damaging the national security of America. And so, is it actually pressing?
You know why they can't find examples? Because we have an insanely good vetting process when it comes to refugees. It's an 18 to 24-month process. And it's very, very comprehensive, and it involves various intelligence organizations coming together and vetting over and over again to ensure the people coming into the country are not a threat. And if you look at the demographics and you look at the statistics, 50% of these individuals are actually children, another 25% are the elderly. And you want to know what percentage include military-age men? 2%. Okay, so it's all fear-mongering, and all of this is much to do about nothing, right? If they can't provide examples, it's because we've done a good enough job at vetting people who are coming into the country.
But then let's also turn to those who are trying to stop the ban. And the argument that they've largely centered on that got the ban to be temporarily blocked is that while, yes, the president does have wide latitude to control immigration policy, that's one of the things the Constitution does allow, he's not allowed to go against the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. And so let's talk about that. The argument that this unfairly targets, at least in part, is intended to target people of Muslim descent. So Ninth Circuit Judge Michelle Friedland asked, what if the order said no Muslims? No Muslims at all. If there were an order that prevented the entry of Muslims, this is a DOJ lawyer, I think that raises Establishment Clause First Amendment issues. But that's not the order we have here. And so they're trying to debate, is that actually the point of this ban? And they don't want to admit it anymore. It has nothing to do with Muslims. It just targets 7 countries that are the vast majority of which are Muslim. But the Washington and Minnesota lawsuit alleges that there is evidence that Trump's intentional animus towards Muslims exists. Several public statements made by then-candidate Trump about banning Muslims from the United States, in one case promising a, quote, complete and total shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. President Trump's January 27th interview at the Christian Broadcast Network stating that his travel ban would favor Christians, and Rudy Giuliani's January 28th statement on Fox News that Trump instructed him to set up a commission to enact a, quote, Muslim ban, and that he gave him it. And so both during the campaign and less than 2 weeks ago, they were all using the language of a Muslim ban, specifically targeting Muslims. And so it seems like a pretty strong case to make. Now, the DOJ lawyer responded by saying it's extraordinary for a court to enjoin the president's national security determination based on some newspaper articles that quote the president, and that is what is happening here. It's very troubling that you're second-guessing a national security decision made by the president, and this should make you feel a little bit better if you want this ban to be stopped. Judge Richard Clifton said, stop. Do you deny that statements attributed to then-candidate Trump and his presidential advisors, most recently Mr. Giuliani, do you deny those statements were made? The DOJ attorney responded, no, those are on the record. And so that may indicate that they're not really buying the DOJ's case, that this isn't specifically meant to target Muslims.
Look, I want to be completely fair to Trump and his administration.
Please.
There are some Muslims that he's very comfortable with, and they have not had to deal with the travel ban whatsoever, and those are Muslims in Saudi Arabia. Now, never mind the fact that the majority of hijackers on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. Never mind the fact that there's been a history of imams in Saudi Arabia radicalizing individuals against the United States. I mean, Trump's got businesses in Saudi Arabia. During his campaign, he registered 8 companies in Saudi Arabia. So he's not really concerned about certain Muslims as long as they come from a certain country where he has certain financial interests. But Muslims in these other countries, he's got a problem with.
I don't think you're being fair. Yes,
Maybe
he registered 8 businesses, but that was back during the campaign. I'm sure most of them have gone bankrupt by now. The last point I want to make on this is I am very concerned about Trump's attempts to delegitimize the courts in this country. He's making good progress with the media, and he's been attacking the courts lately, and I think that will continue. Today he was talking with some sheriffs, and he said, "It is really incredible to me that we have a court case that is going on so long." The ban was blocked 5 days ago, and his challenge to it came 3 days ago. We're expecting a decision possibly tonight. Going on so long. This is a guy who's been sued literally thousands of times, pretending that he doesn't understand how long court cases take. This has taken less than a week. Seems reasonable to me. But he went on, and I'm not going to read all the quotes, about talking about how politicized the courts are. And if they wanted to get respect back, they could simply put out a statement showing that they support him in all that he does, which would imply that they would be nothing more than a rubber stamp for his dictatorial urges.